How's everybody doing? Can everybody hear me?
Can hear you.
I can hear you, Kush.
Can hear you.
Awesome. A lot less people in here right now. Probably enjoying the good weather we actually had today, or relatively good weather. I'm gonna give it probably another 2 minutes, then we'll get started. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the third meeting of Healthcare Workers for Financial Independence. Again, this will be recorded. Thank you all for showing up, and for those that are returning or people that are new, always welcome to have you. The goal of this is to spread some information. I'm not trying to sell anything, just trying to teach things that I know and hopefully empower you to really think about your financial future and set up correctly. This will be recorded as, I don't know if it says recording anywhere, but it's already recording, and I post these all on YouTube. So the objectives of today is to talk about asset location, putting it all together with the order of operations, student loans, and then with that, the basics, the different repayment programs, forgiveness-free programs, refinancing, and then suggested help based on people that I've seen or groups that I would send somebody to. And these first two things are just a continuation of last time, as we didn't get time to finish those. But first, I always ask this: what did you do in the last month to ensure the success of your financial future? Who do we have on here? Shobana, what did you do in the last month? Or Janice?
Sorry, Kush, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, well, I think we should go to Janice because I don't have a great answer for you.
No worries.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I contributed to my Roth for the year just a week ago.
Awesome. Who do you use? Vanguard?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're pretty easy to do. I think if you do a Roth contribution right at the beginning of the year, it's super easy because you have it out of the way. They make it super simple and you don't have to worry about it. And you have until actually the following April. So it's a lot of time, but getting it out of the way now is a great idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great. I'm only calling on repeat customers here. Everyone else looks pretty new. So something I did, if you all remember this house that I was talking about in the first meeting, I have this under renovation now in Fayetteville. Looked like an apocalypse happened. It's looking a lot better. It's almost done. They're working on the kitchen. They've fixed up the outside, put a new bathroom in. So from looking like an apocalyptic house to this is a great step. Plus, for those people that have invested with me to get awesome returns, this is a good step towards that. I've also been working on wellness, trying to work out more, trying to prevent burnout in different ways, especially with the surge right now. I think it's important to take time for yourself. So this is a short little section on asset location, and I wanted to get to it last time, but I really didn't have the time. It's important because people often miss it and they don't think about it, and it can lead to a huge tax implication for them. And what this really means is we talked about how to pick your assets in the last meeting, but we didn't really talk about what accounts to preferentially put them in: stocks, bonds. If you had the choice, should it go in a Roth, a 401k, a taxable? And this is sort of that final step of when you manage it in that Excel file, you can see on a whole scale, where you should put things, and then have a strategic idea too of where they should go. And this is really based on two principles, and this is taken from the Bogleheads blog, of that it's really based on tax efficiency and the strength of the asset for returns. So what this means is you'll see a chart here: most tax efficient and least tax efficient. Down here, your real estate investment funds, your active funds, your high corporate bonds, they're all very tax efficient. In the middle comes total market bonds, active stock funds. Right in the middle here is moderate yield bonds and money market funds. Things that are really good and tax efficient are your tax managed stock funds, your US stock funds, the things that we were talking about last time, the VTSAX, VTI. And this is important because and I'll show you in a second, you want to place your most tax efficient funds in the account with less tax drag. You can do that, but you can actually place tax efficient accounts anywhere. You want to place your least tax efficient accounts in the account with less tax drag, so you're not getting taxed on it. And I'll show you an example of this. The stepwise approach that they say, and this really only matters once you've maxed out your retirement accounts. It really only is that next step of if you invest in a taxable account, because if you invest in like Roths or 401ks, it doesn't really matter any of this order. It's just more of, once you get to that step, how do you optimize your portfolio? And they really recommend first categorizing your portfolio's tax efficiency, like we said, placing your least tax efficient funds first, placing international stock funds in a taxable account, and I'll explain why, placing high growth stock funds then, and then placing your most tax efficient funds last. It'll make more sense when I go through this. So imagine you have maxed out your retirement accounts completely, your Roth IRAs, your 401ks, and now you can invest in a taxable account. You look at everything all together and you say, okay, let me look at my least tax efficient funds first. What's not on here is REITs, but they're trying to make it easy for a 3-fund portfolio. You'll take this middle of the road here, total market bond fund, and you'll either put it in a tax deferred account, which is like a 401k, 403b, or a tax-free account like a Roth. The reason is that bonds are extremely tax efficient. The interest they produce every year is taxed at your ordinal or marginal tax rate. Again, this is really only a problem if you invest in your taxable account. If you have just retirement accounts, this doesn't even matter. And this is the reason we were talking about too, I bonds are not as great tax-wise, because you can't buy them through a tax-deferred account. You can only buy them in a taxable account, and then you're going to experience that tax drag on it. So this is theoretically, in this situation, this would go first. Next, you have these really good efficient funds. You have your total US stock market fund, but first there's this caveat where it says the total international stock market fund should go in taxable. The reason that is you get a tax credit if your international index fund goes in a taxable account. Sometimes it's not a lot of money. If you have large sums of money, it can be. And, again, reiterating that this is only once you've optimized your entire portfolio in retirement accounts, you can start thinking about, let me move my internationals out of that into a taxable account. Then finally, you get to your total US stock market index funds, which can go into any of these. Recommended as tax-free here because remember, your Roth and your HSA are solid accounts because of the lack of minimum required distribution on it. You can pass it to your heirs easily. You can do a lot of different things with a Roth account over a tax-deferred account. But then they go on to say here, it really doesn't matter. You can put a tax-efficient fund in any of these accounts, taxable, tax-free, tax-deferred. So it's really nitpicking at that point. The other sort of thing to think about too is you want your highest return investments to go in your tax-deferred account because those might produce very, very high returns or losses that might bite you later when you try to take it out of a taxable account. Kind of opposite to that, though, is you do want your most volatile investments in taxable accounts because losses can actually help you, where we'll talk about this at another time. You can do something called a tax loss harvest to offset your gains. Again, that is, you have to weigh out all of these things, and it gets kind of into the weeds. But for the most part, I think in the beginning, just think about it this way and try to optimize these tax deferred accounts first. And once you get to the point where you can invest in a taxable account, start to build this framework, and then you can weigh out, where should I put my volatile assets? Where can I put my assets with the highest returns? Any questions on that? Cool. I know that was confusing, but Bogleheads is a good resource. The White Coat Investor has a good podcast on it. And this is just, if you want to look through this again, you can go on their site, see this framework, or just watch this again. So putting it all together, this is brought over from last time too. What order should you do things in? And really, it's not just what order of accounts, it's what order should you tackle things in. And this is from the Money Guy Show, which I think is another great resource. And I'll compare the White Coat Investor to this. They're very similar in terms of their order of operations on how you create an attack plan. And I'll show you there's not much differences between the two. Really, the beginning should be, you got to have your deductibles covered. That's insurance, protecting against catastrophe. Disability insurance, I'll talk about next time. Home, auto, things like that have to be covered, because if you don't have those things covered, then none of this else matters. So number two, this falls very high on all of these sort of order of operations, is get your employer match no matter what. Free money is free money. If you're not getting your employer match, you're just essentially throwing away free money at that point. So think about getting that match, but then think about these other things before you go back to that employer plan. High interest debt should always go first. If you have debt over 8 to 10% and it's not used to leverage real estate, or you're not taking it out as a short-term loan to like get more interest rate and bigger gains, if it's like credit card debt, that has to go, because paying off that is an instant return. If you imagine paying off a 20% credit card, you're essentially getting a 20% return on your money there. So focus that right after getting this free money. The emergency reserves, I think, is a good place to go at number 4 here, a lot because most of America has less than $500 in an emergency fund. But also, you want to do this before you do anything else, because you never know when things can come up. The savvy investor, like we talked about last time, you can use your Roth contributions as an emergency fund. I don't recommend it because you're losing potential gains on it, but it's a great backup emergency fund. Number 5, your Roth and HSA should come first. And I'll go through why, except for certain situations. HSA is the best retirement account you can own because it's triple tax savings. Roth, based off the benefits, and you can knock these out fairly quickly. It's not as high as getting the required payment plan into a 401k or 403b. So just like Janice was saying, knock out the Roth, you're in the right income bracket for it, and you'll be thanking yourself later. Then go back and max out the rest of your retirement accounts. Once you've sort of settled these things, say, hey, now let me go knock out the 403b, 401k again, 4057. The money guys call this stage 7 a hyperaccumulator phase, where you start to invest in your taxable account. You start to really put a lot of money away once these things are settled. I would even lump 6, 7, 8 all together. And 8 is where you start contributing to your child's 529 college fund and you start planning for the future. Low interest debt falls in last. Low interest debt can be pushed off. That's like 2 to 3% debt. Not pushed off in the sense of not paying it off completely. You have to do the payments on it. Pushed off in the sense of if you're getting a higher return elsewhere, it's a better use of your money. And if you're doing these other things first, you're likely coming out ahead, especially with inflation. The white coat investor has a very similar one that you can see. So they're all sort of matched together, but you have number 1 here, obtain the employer match, free money. Number 2, eliminate high interest debt. Number 3, fund an HSA. He puts that right off the bat if you do a high deductible health plan. Number 4, fund all available retirement accounts. 5 was not in the other one, considered defined benefit cash balance plan. This is like a pension if you have it. 6, he puts in moderate interest debt, should go here, your 4 to 8% loan debt and loans. 7 is where the taxable account comes in, and especially if you can get high returns. Then you get to your low interest debt, and then your taxable account again with low returns. So this is really a very similar framework to the money guys show, but they just add a couple of things in there. You're going to be set for life and retirement if you follow this strategy because you're covering all your bases. You may ask, so which one should come first, pre-tax or Roth? In general, the rules are you should fund your tax-free Roth first, unless you're in your peak earnings years. The exception to this is if you're going for the public loan forgiveness program, you want to reduce your student loan payment monthly to have the minimum payment possible, aka more forgiven. The less you pay per month, the more that's forgiven. Really with this, there's other ways to go about that too, because you can do the HSA and drop your taxable income, and you can do a combination of these things. You can use your paycheck for PSLF and they'll go off that versus, let's say, if you moonlight. But if you're thinking about really reducing your taxable income, the tax deferred accounts like your 401k and 403b are a little bit better. If you're in your peak earnings years, like attending time, then you do a backdoor Roth IRA first, which we'll talk about at a later meeting, assuming it doesn't go away. And then you can max out your 401k and 403bs, your traditional IRAs. And if you really don't need to decrease your taxable income, like you have other ways to decrease it or it's not a concern for you, then you can do a Roth 401k like Vanderbilt has, and that's money that's put away tax-free. There's really no income limits for it. This is a summary, a little bit of what we talked about, I think in the first meeting, was thinking about which one should come first in your mind and the benefits of each. A Roth IRA, the pros, no required minimum distributions, guaranteed tax-free withdrawal and retirement. And I was actually reading the other day that there's up to a 94% marginal tax rate during World War II. I don't think that's going to happen again, but you're just thinking about the future, like how crazy things can get. Take out penalty-free contributions as an emergency account and unlimited investment options if your work plan sucks. Don't mind that other plan here. Pre-tax, employer match, free money, higher tax deductible contributions, 19K versus 6K, and even the 6K is not tax deductible. Works best if you think your tax rate will be low in retirement, which it likely could be if it's really up to you on how much you take out. And great for student loans if you're going for forgiveness. But ideally, you should be maxing out both. Just the order, I think, makes the difference. Any questions on that before we move on to just talking about student loans? Well, if anyone does, they could always just send me a message, or when we're done, we can go back to it. So student loans, this was something that people requested to come up early because I think it's a big issue to talk about. Disclaimer, I'm not a student loan advisor. I've just continued to educate myself over the last 5 years. If you need personalized advice, I can give you general ideas, but you should probably sign up for one of the advisors I mentioned later. I don't get a kickback or anything. I just think they're vetted and they're better than the people that email you guys through your email, like Vanderbilt or work emails. So just a little PSA, federal loans right now are paused until May 1st at a 0 interest rate. So student loans are a problem. The U.S. has recorded a breaking 1.73 trillion in student loan debt, which is actually half the annual federal budget. And how did this happen? It's a combination of tuition going up, inflated by colleges, especially private and overseas, but academic centers are just to blame. Unlimited borrowing power, Grad Plus and Parent Plus, is a big issue because it allows borrowers to borrow anything they want. And schools got wind to that, and they started to raise their tuition, where it may not be worth it for the education you're getting behind that, and pumping graduates out with no jobs available. So it's a big problem that's multifactorial, like everything. But I paid $450,000 to get through St. George's in the Caribbean. And they fail out 70% of people in the first semester, and they keep 40 grand after the first semester if you fail you out, and you don't get a refund on that. And that just leads to this problem of sort of just worsening the student loan debt problem we have. It's just crazy. Your goal should be to figure out a strategy now to tackle your student loans, as paying off high interest debt is an automatic investment return. So the basics are really, there's two types of loans. There's a federal loan and private loans. And federal and private, where if you think about it, federal is through the government, private is through a third-party organization that originates the loan. Your rule is to try to take out federal loans first, as they have lower interest rates and federal protections. Private loans do not qualify for forgiveness and are not dischargeable upon death or disability. There's really 4 different strategies here. You either pay off your loans slowly, the minimum payments without forgiveness. You pay off your loans aggressively with extra payments without forgiveness. You pay off your loans slowly and plan for forgiveness. And this is sort of an overarching thing, is you either do federal and you keep them federal, or you refinance into private and you don't have forgiveness with private. Paying off your loans aggressively with forgiveness doesn't make sense. Unless it's like, you're close to getting forgiven and, it's through a different workplace program, but through like a federal forgiveness program, you want to have the most forgiven as possible, especially if it's tax-free. So doubling payments or paying things off aggressively when you're going a forgiveness program is not included in this, because it just doesn't make sense. And we'll go through all of that. So types of forgiveness programs. You have your federal income-driven repayment, which is abbreviated here IDRF, which we'll go through, encompasses a couple of things. Your PSLF, which is federal. Both of these are federal, which is your public student loan forgiveness program. Employers can offer forgiveness programs. Like sometimes you'll see some jobs will say, if you work here for a certain amount of time, we'll forgive a certain amount of your student loans. Private hospitals may say this. And then there's this NIH loan repayment program, which is like a grant, like a K grant or an R grant. So first, we're just going to talk about federal loans. You have types of loans. You have subsidized and unsubsidized. A subsidized loan is loans that the education department pays interest on for you during your undergraduate schooling. This is no longer for graduate schools. So some of you may have subsidized loans, but if we're talking about med school, CRNA, nursing school, things like that, I'm not sure that you'll have any subsidized loans, possibly nursing, because that's a bachelor's. But unsubsidized is what you're mostly going to have. Interest rates start occurring the moment you receive them, and this includes your PLUS loans. The Stafford loan you may have seen is the same thing as the direct loan. It's just different words for the same thing. The most common types of this is a direct subsidized, again, only to undergraduates, and a direct unsubsidized, which many of us have. What are you eligible for if you have a direct loan? All the standard repayment programs, the income-based repayment programs, which includes payee, repayee, ICR, which we'll get into, and then all the forgiveness programs that are federal. There's this thing called the Family Federal Education Loan that no longer exists. It actually disbanded around 2010. It was, if you look at the history of student loans, what existed for maybe 20 years prior, and it was backed by bank and nonprofit lenders. And the crash of 2008 led to this really going away, and then the institution of the direct loan, which is just backed by the federal government. You have a PLUS loan, and A plus loan can be attached to direct or the FFEL if you're old school and you have that. And it's issued only to graduates. And this is the one that has like the huge borrowing power. And what is it eligible for? Well, if before you consolidate and after you consolidate, really everything you can imagine. If you have the FFEL plus, it is some things before consolidation, like the PSLF, Repayee, ICR, and Payee after 2007. But once you consolidate, you get everything. Parent Plus is for parents to finance child's educations. You might see this out there. Offered for undergraduates, graduates, and professionals. What is it eligible for? Where prior to consolidation, you get standard repayment programs. You don't get the fancy income-based programs until you consolidate. You get forgiveness via this ICR program only. If you want PSLF, you have to do a double consolidation, which sounds confusing, and I would not do it unless you had a student loan advisor walk you through this. Finally, you have this thing called a Perkins loan, which was created to provide those with financial need, and it ended in 2017. And before consolidation, it's not eligible for really anything. After consolidation, it's eligible for all the things. So shifting away, those are types of loans. These are now repayment programs federally. You have a standard repayment program and you have an income-driven repayment program, not to be confused with an income-driven forgiveness. So the standard plan is what really everyone enters into unless you select not. And a standard plan is 10 years of paying off your loan in 120 fixed payments based on the loan amount and interest. The analogous thing to this is, let's say you were to take out a car loan. It's not going to be based off your income. They're going to give you the loan based off the time of the loan and the interest rate. Benefits include you can pay off your loan fast, 10 years, but not feasible for a resident with less than six-figure income because the monthly payments are going to be extraordinary with this, especially if you have high loans. And you don't qualify for this if you consolidate your loans. So it's only before you consolidate that you can get something like the standard plan. You now have your income-driven repayment programs. It's an umbrella term. What that means is payments are based on a procession of your discretionary income. 20 to 25 years is what it's built in for you to get these paid off. It's great for residents and fellows, even early attendings. Disadvantages, it does not come close to covering accrued interest with the smaller payments. The standard plan, because the payments are so high, it covers that interest. You're just essentially with this kicking the can down the road. So some of the methods include, I wrote methods here, but that really should be what falls under IDR. And it's income contingent repayment, ICR, that's one program. Income-based repayment, IBR, that's another program. Pay-as-you-earn, Payee right here. And refis, pay-as-you-earn, Repayee. These are four things under this branch of IDR. Does that make sense to everybody? Assuming it does. So I'm going to go into each individual one now. ICR doesn't really exist anymore. It's a legacy program. They used to calculate your monthly payment based off 20% of your discretionary income. Maybe used with Parent Plus after consolidation. So who should consider this? Parent borrowers if you still have it. This you're going to see a lot more of, the income-based payment, the IBR. Payments are capped at 10% of your income for new borrowers after 2014. A cool thing about this is payments are capped at the standard 10-year repayment plan level. So if you imagine you go from a pay bump, once you start working or get a higher salary, it'll look at this payment versus the 10-year, and you cannot go over what the 10-year standard would be. Other ones that don't do this, you could go over that or anywhere in between, but this will cap itself at that 10-year. It's the only one that can be used with the old FFEL. Your interest is not capitalized until you leave your program. And this is going to become an important factor because you can file, if you file your taxes married filing separately, you can exclude your spouse's income from your payment. Not all of them do this. So this will lower your payment. So this is considered for dual income borrowers and those going for loan forgiveness unable to qualify for Payee. So then you have Payee, it's 10%. Payments are also capped at the standard 10-year. Married folks can file their taxes married filing separately. Interest is not capitalized until you leave the program, very similar. But the amount is capitalized, is limited to 10% of the loan balance. So this is another benefit that the IBR doesn't have, because once it starts to get capitalized, it can just keep going. This is capped at 10% of your loan balance at any time. It's sort of an extra level or step of benefit. So most people will say, if you're going to pick between IBR and payee is usually better. So dual income borrower is going for loan forgiveness, unless you have some weird situation. What you really got to think about is, should you do repayee? It's the newer version of payee, 10% of your discretionary income. No cap on payments. So this is sort of a downside to it, is it could go over your standard 10-year, let's say when you become an attending. This is another thing, you are unable to separate your spouse's income from your student loan payment using the married filing separately trick. The benefit of this program is that, unlike others, your interest rate is subsidized by the government, which means, in other terms, they're paying for a part of your interest. So this is an example. Consider someone with $200,000 in unsubsidized loans at 6%. Each month that loan generates $1,000 in interest. If the required payment, 10% of your discretionary income, is $200 a month, under payee, $800 of interest would be added to the loan each month. But again, capped at that 10% of the loan balance. But under repayee, the government's always going to pay half of that just for you. You never even see it. So only $400 would be added. So who should consider this? Single, sole earner, households, borrowers, and training. The reason they put sole earners here, and we'll kind of go through a little bit of a chart later, is that this is where a student loan advisor comes in, because once you're married, the married filing jointly can help you in a lot of ways tax-wise, but it can hurt you with this. So especially if there's a high income on dual incomes for both people, essentially who have student loans, that you have to really weigh out, is the tax benefits going to be better with married filing jointly versus how much your payments are going to be per month for your student loans. And you have to weigh out all those situations, likely with the tax advisor, and really looking at your situation, because a lot of people do recommend repayee in the beginning, like I've done. But once you get to a certain income threshold and you're married, you really have to think about switching to payee, and that's likely the most beneficial thing. And it's not a hard switch. It just requires you to be strategic and time it right. So we'll go a little bit more of that again later, but I want to talk quickly about private loans. So underwriters who will give you private loans will look at your credit score, debt to income ratio, and employment history. U.S. citizenship is usually required, and a cosigner is often needed with good credit, and a cosigner has to have a relationship with the borrower. Your debt to income ratio is important for a lot of things when it comes to private loans. And what that really is are your liabilities per month meeting a certain ratio of your income per month? And they really like to see that your liabilities are less than 40% of your income in a given month. Repayment with a private loan is based on minimizing the interest is key. Refinance as soon as you're able to in one of the vetted refinance companies with low interest rates like Laurel Road or SoFi. Your goal with private loans, if you already have them, is to get them to the lowest interest rate possible. And there's a couple of payment methods you can do. You can do immediate repayment, which means payments begin right away as soon as the loan comes out. Let's say while you're still in school. It allows you to pay from day one. You knock out principal and interest ongoing. Interest only is you pay only interest while you're in school. Partial is you pay a low fixed payment of principal and interest. This leads to a larger balance later, but you're still knocking it down. And full deferment is you don't pay any of it while you're in school and you have a 6-month grace period for graduation. So my thoughts are private loans should only be taken out after the maximum federal loans for the year, or your school doesn't qualify, like an international or Caribbean school. If you refinance from federal into a private loan, you have to be absolutely sure that you're not going a forgiveness program, because it eliminates any forgiveness programs. You have to know that your income from the setting you're going into is going to pay for your loan with the better interest rate, with the plan, that the benefits of all the forgiveness that's going to happen with these programs, it's just going to outweigh it. So now let's talk about forgiveness. Everyone's heard of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. It's really your entire loan amount is forgiven tax-free after 120 payments are made. Only direct federal loans are eligible, so you have to consolidate into direct federal. You must be employed full-time, 30 hours per week by a nonprofit, 501c3, or government employer. You must make the 120 payments on time in an eligible program. Usually has to be an IBR program, like Payee, Repayee, IBR, ICR if it still existed. Must correctly fill out the annual employer certification, which is going to be key. So the question that I often get asked, and I often hear, is, am I going to get forgiven? And it's important to understand, I think, the history of this loan. A lot of the people that really look into this and have the advisor group I talk about later, Travis Hornsby, who talks to the white coat investor all the time, it's really people, the media sort of spins this false rate of forgiveness. And this bill, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness, was initially created around 2010, or it was written in 2007, but it came to fruition mostly in 2010 because it was written not for the FFEL program, only for direct loans. Well, if you remember, most loans were FFEL back then, and direct loans didn't take place until 2010. So most people couldn't even get PSLF until 2010. Then it took until 2011 or 12 as you had to consolidate into a direct loan. And that takes time. And most people didn't even adopt this until the 2012 mark. So the earliest someone could have been forgiven in the perfect system for this was in the last 2 years. A 90% failure rate is misleading, according to this interview, which I 100% believe from what I'm seeing nowadays, because if 70% of people are filling it out wrong in the paperwork, not understanding the terms and what loans qualify, and the loan servicers can make mistakes. But those that are in the system now doing it correctly, I'm on this Facebook group, PSLF, and I advise anyone going for this should do it. If somebody's getting forgiven almost every day in that group, their loans are just disappearing. Because I think now Fed Loans and everybody is like working with them to fix all the errors, but this is not something with a 95% failure rate. That is, I think, wildly inaccurate. So if you do it correctly, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, or I think more, if you're already in the program, you should be fine. And they expect an increase of 10 times as many people forgiven by 2025. If you're going for PSLF, these are my tips. So make sure you verify the place you're working as a 503c. You don't want to work somewhere that is not, or we'll get into that and you plan for it and you find out they're not. Be careful that you may think you're working for an academic center, but you may be working for a private practice group that is contracted with the academic center, and that doesn't qualify usually. You have to make sure that the group you're working for is employed with the hospital, not a private group. Make sure you have a program coordinator or administrator that will advocate for you and fill out your paperwork correctly. It's a lower thing, but a reason I picked Vanderbilt, and with many other things, was the pulmonary critical care coordinator is amazing, Michael Beasley. He knows how to do this. He keeps up with it. And I knew that for the time I have here, it'll get done perfectly. Again, don't pick places based off this, but just think about it. Recertify your employment every year. This is the most important factor. If you think you're going to wait 10 years and then put in all your payments or talk to the loan servicer about this, you're going to have a lot of issues. Every June, I recertify my employment and make sure and hound them to get it up to date. And I have the exact amount of payments completely covered now for 6 years from when I started this. So you just have to stay on top of this and every year recertify and hound them. You can't wait till 10 years down the line. This is a cool trick that I was lucky to learn about into the white coat investor world when I was listening to it in medical school. I call it the intern just out of school hack. So for a lot of people, it may be too late. But You can consolidate early to enter Repayee or one of these programs right before you start intern year and after medical school. Once you consolidate, you start the PSLF clock. You need to also file a tax return your 4th year of medical school in the spring, because the fact that it's best if you made no money, because it'll show you made no money that year. This will make your Repayee money for your entire intern year 0. And those should all count towards PSLF. So you have one entire year's worth at 0, one less year at an attending or high level salary. So my entire first year was 0. And now with this COVID forbearance, it's been 0 too. So sort of good luck and timing. So if it's too late for people, I'd recommend you talk to your friends in medical school or, CRNA school or nursing school or anything to see if they can do this. And what if you
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So my servicers switched from Nelnet to FedLoan without me sort of asking for that, which is fine. But in the process of that happening, they kind of dropped the ball and they haven't accounted for a large number of payments I've made that count under public service loan forgiveness, largely because they're $0 for this reason. And so they're trying not to count them, despite the fact that I have evidence that I did my payment, even if it was $0. And so I have to call them once a month for the past couple months and it's still not fixed. Do you know of anyone else who's had this problem or a better way to kind of go around these issues that are on the servicer's end?
Yeah, that's frustrating because they should count. FedLoan, I'm lucky that I had FedLoan, and they're switching me from FedLoan, which sucks because FedLoan I think is a good company.
Right.
All of my payments are 0 for FedLoan, and they all say counted. So
okay,
I think the way it is you have precedent when it comes down the line. People are suing the federal government because of these issues. So I would keep track that it's covered from your employer, you have proof that it's certified for that time frame, even those 0 payments. And then when it comes time, when they switch you fight for it with the new servicer. Comes time, that's when you really push back hard and say this is covered. People are saying for these situations like this, you may have to have a lawyer get involved. It's unfortunate, but I would keep good documentation and you 100% have those covered if it's with I'm assuming you did a 503c that year. So just keep good documentation, keep fighting, tell your new servicer if they switch you that this needs to be fixed. And then when it comes time to reapply, you just have to hammer them with that.
Got it. Okay, thanks. I was just curious. I appreciate it.
It's frustrating. I don't know, because you can't refinance into a private loan if you're planning to go for it. So it's
exactly.
You're sort of stuck dealing with bad companies, unfortunately.
Oh yeah.
But that's a great question. And keep me posted too, and keep us posted on if you can get it figured out, because I am worried about switching away from FedLoan. And I didn't put this in here. Make sure to keep good documentation. And I save all of my employment certifications. I save all pictures of the payments on FedLoans to a Google Drive. So when time comes, just make sure you have evidence that you can refute this. So I still don't believe PSLF will be real when it comes time. And this is often asked. Well, who knows, right? I think it will 100% be for the next 5 years. 10 years maybe, likely. 20 years, I can't tell you. If you have a fear of it going away, which if you have a promissory note by federal government law, you have to really get it. That's how a promissory note works. It's in the promissory notes we've signed. But let's say it does go away. Have what's called a PSLF side fund. Try to invest it in an index fund or anything. Put it in a taxable account. Have it in just a separate, money market account that's getting good returns. That, let's say this were to go away, you could offset that with that account. This is not feasible for a lot of people. I think it's if you're getting close to PSLF and you're set. I have, I'll have 9 years of training essentially all covered. I'm not even worrying about this. If you have a little while to go and you want to do this, I would set this up. The other option is to refinance to crush through your loans unless the overall benefit of all that forgiveness outweighs what you'll get paid over that time frame in a public versus private sector job. Again, this is just weighing out the benefit. For a lot of high income earners, like if you're going into derm or optho, things like that, it makes more sense to refinance. Like you're going to crush through these quickly. You don't even have to worry about all this forgiveness nonsense. But if you're not, then I would highly consider it. So this is the other confusing factor, is how they name things. It's like pulmonary fibrosis with all the letters. IDR forgiveness program, I call it IDRF, is another forgiveness program attached to the IDR programs. It's essentially a backup plan that's always attached to these. If you make payments for 20 to 25 years, all is forgiven, but it's taxable. And that can be a huge tax bill. The public loan forgiveness is tax-free. So this, in effect, if you have like $400,000 in loans and you go for this, it can just be a huge tax bill that year. Benefits are the low monthly payment versus a standard plan. If you have to do this, you have to do this. And it doesn't really matter if you work in a public sector with this, but you got to qualify for a partial hardship, which is training in a sense. And I think you could probably still get this if I was reading, if you're already into it as a trainee and you advance to like something else, you're still in this program. So it really always is the backup program for the PSLF if you want to do that. Refinancing. So refinancing, in basic terms, is you have a third-party company come in and create a new loan for that one you have now, for whatever you owe. They pay off the original loan and they create a new loan for you. Often comes at a lower interest rate. It could be fixed or variable interest. Time frame can vary. It could be as quick as 5 years and up to 30 years. You can get a kickback bonus just for refinancing through a lot of companies or partnered companies. And you do not qualify, but you lose forgiveness programs and you don't get any income-based payments. You don't get 10% of your income. It's just whatever the loan time is and interest rate. The key is you can refinance as much as you really want and early and often. Ideally, you don't want to keep doing it, but you could do it if you wanted to. So who should refinance their student loans? Those with private loans already with higher interest rates. Poor servicers that are not handling your loan well. Like Janice, if you're already heading for PSLF, that's not a good example, but it's an example of somebody not heading for that and they're not handling your loan well. Not going for PSLF, and this is the same thing said again. You have to weigh out your income difference over that time frame versus the amount of tax-free forgiveness. Who should not refinance? Well, you can't afford the monthly payment on a private loan. It can be high. And it makes the most sense for those in training to stay with federal at that point. You're headed towards PSLF, and interest rates can be higher on private. It's not always lower. You really have to weigh that out. So let's say you want to refinance. How do you get the best interest rate and deal? Well, interest rates depend highly on your credit score. So make sure you're doing the things that are normally good for good credit scores. Payment history, debt to income ratio, length of credit history, new applications. People shy away from credit cards, but as long as you're paying them off, they can be great because they improve your credit history, and we'll have a whole different meeting on credit card points. Comparison shop. This is important. You all want to look around at all of the good vetted private loan companies to find the best rates for you. Shorter term loans will have 5-year loans will have the best rates. Generally, there'll be variable rates that will change, which will equal high payments. And if you look into things like auto pay, you can get discounts or kickbacks. So I'll show you a little chart. The white coat investor, if you go through him, and I probably would if I were doing this, is you get like up to $2,000 of free money on a lot of this. They just send you like a check for $2,000 just by doing it with them. And you get a course with him too. You get a Fire Your Financial Advisor course by going through him. You can do what's called a refinancing ladder. So that means you start with a long-term loan, so your payments are lower. You say, hey, SoFi, I want a 30-year loan to pay lower payments. You shovel tons of money at that loan, and once it's lower, then you can switch to a 5 to 10-year variable rate. This avoids the huge monthly payments. This is a fix for how you get around, like, essentially when you're an attending or making high salary, getting those huge tax bond payments.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Oh, Siri wanted to comment. The required payments will be lower if more of the principal is paid back. If you want to knock out your loans quickly, though, I recommend, if you don't have much left, just do a 5-year variable. Interest rates are low right now. if you got a plan to just rock through those pretty quick, it's honestly better to just do that and get rid of them. Pros and cons. So pros, lower interest rates for refinancing, potentially. Fewer loans to keep track of. You can make them all one nice loan. Sometimes better customer service, easier to understand the terms, and sometimes you get cool cashback bonuses. Cons, you lose all forgiveness programs. You be very high payments. Sometimes not discharged at death, but you can protect against this with disability insurance coverage through some programs. And that variable rate can be dangerous if you hold it for a long time. Let's say we enter a interest rate environment where interest rates go very high, your rate can flip and become negative, and you're in the essentially, paying huge interest rates and losing money. So you got to be very careful on how long you hold a variable rate. These are taken from his site, and you can see, the ones I've heard the most about are SoFi and Laurel Road. But if you go through him, you get like up to $1,300 just free. And the interest rates look pretty good, variable versus fixed. And you can compete with different companies, and they could sort of price match each other if you're looking at this. Finally, there's what's called an NIH loan repayment program, established by Congress and designed to recruit and retain high qualified health professionals to do biomedical and biobehavioral research. You repay up to $50,000 annually of qualified educational debt in return for a commitment to the NIH for a couple of years. This is a research grant. It's the same thing as a K-23 and R01. So you need to have a research plan, a proposal, a mentor. This really only applies to people in academics. So not a bad idea if you're heading down a physician scientist pathway. They do forgive a fair amount. So I thought this was a really cool algorithm from the White Coat Investors website. It sort of looks sort of like Monopoly a little bit, but pretend you're a resident and start here. Refinance private loans if they have a high interest rate. Get that out of the way. If you have federal, Perkins and FFEL, put that into direct. You want to get rid of those. Is it possible you'll work for a PSLF eligible employer after residency? Let's say no first, then refinance. And then compare that to just staying in, choose a loan with lower rates, make extra payments, plan to refinance again after residency. This really says stay in federal while you're in it and then refinance after. Yes, so you're planning to do it after residency also. Are you a single or single earner in your family? Yes, so calculate your payments under the repayee. Can you afford them? No. This is kind of tongue in cheek, but this really gets into the fact that you should never put your loans into forbearance unless it's federal. What's happening now is totally cool because it's all counted. But if you put your loans into forbearance, you're just getting behind, interest rates occurring. You can figure out a plan, especially if you essentially budget correctly. So back to here, if you really have to, you can defer. But if you're in this little box here and you can do repayee, enroll in repayee, like I did, make the minimum payments, consider tax deferred. That goes back to the beginning of this, where we were talking about consider like 403Bs, maxing them out to get the lowest payments per month. If you're here and you're not single, this is where talking to a group would be good to figure out, is payee better for you? Consider married filing separately, consider tax deferred instead of Roth again, things like that. Once you're an attending, start here. Are you directly employed full-time by a 503c? Yes. Did you make these 20 small payments for the programs? Yes. And then what IDR you rolled in. If you're in IBR or repayee, it's better to go to payee when you make high income, like I was saying. If you're already in payee, you can think about the income-driven forgiveness program, but ideally start saving up for a PSLF side fund. If you think you're going for PSLF, keep careful records, pester Fed loans. If it's a bad company, I think you keep pestering and hope it works. Here, if it's not a 501c, do you have huge loans, like 3 to 4 times your gross income? Just get advice on what you're going to do and think about refinancing to the lowest interest rate. Shovel your income into it aggressively at your new job. Get special deals, keep refinancing to lower rates. And then if you're going for these programs that are not the PSLF, still with a non-50C3 employer, just save for this tax bomb with the IDR forgiveness program. So these people don't pay me. I just think after reading and listening and looking, they're probably the two best groups that could help you. Student Loan Advice is created from the White Coat Investors site. It's like their parent. They're the parent company, and they're below it. It's run by Andrew Paulson, and then Student Loan Planner Travis Hornsby is around for a while. I think he's really knowledgeable, and you're probably good going with either one of these, and they can help you with your individual situation. So next time we'll talk about disability insurance and maybe term and whole life if we have time. Blogs, podcasts, investment books again. Books I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth. I've been following the short-term rental space for a little while, and it's kind of the hot topic now in the real estate world. So this is a good book. It's from the Short-Term Shop Group. And this book by Ray Dalio, if anybody knows the book Principles, it's really good. He has a book called The Changing World Order, talking about geopolitics and the study of major empires and how we can maybe improve throughout the future based off past rises and falls and economic changes. Tax books, YouTube channels, future topics. I added this recently, charities, donor advised funds, because I realized it wasn't in there. All right, right at an hour. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you know if you can refinance a portion of your government student loans?
Yeah, you can. I think it makes that portion that you can't get forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
But you can definitely do that from what I've heard. I don't think there's anywhere saying you can't actually do that. It probably is, I've heard, beneficial to do that if you have outdated loans and you have loans with higher interest rates. So what you could preferentially do is refinance a part of the loans that have the highest interest rate, keep the ones that don't, or keep the ones that are not eligible for PSLF, or maybe the ones that are giving you trouble that are attached, to it. But essentially, you have to consolidate to do PSLF. So that makes that problematic. But if you haven't consolidated yet, you could theoretically take a part of that. Are you asking if it's consolidated, could you take a chunk of that and refinance that?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I think they have to be separate loans to get refinanced. Don't quote me on that, but I think once you've consolidated, it's sort of over. You may have to do the whole thing, but I don't know. I think like the Student Loan Advisor Group would be the best ones to answer that. And I can look it up over this week or tomorrow, because that's a great question. I've always heard that like if you have separate loans like that are just bad interest rates or don't qualify, you can just refinance those. But I've never thought about if you consolidated at all, what you do in that situation.
Got it. I guess my only last question was, if you remember, what office at Vanderbilt did you go to get your like ECF sheet filled out? I've been trying to find them and I can't track them down.
So I do our pulmonary critical care division program coordinator. You have to really do what your division you're under.
Okay, so maybe just start with the residency.
Yeah, it would be whoever your resident coordinator is, whoever works for the PD.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm sure they've done it like every year for like hundreds of people. Like Michael Beasley in pulmonary critical care is like, oh yeah, like put it in that stack, and there was like 50 of them. So
okay. Alrighty, thank you.
Of course. Was that helpful? This is a big topic.
Yeah, it was helpful for me. It's, I guess, just for my situation, I'm really tempted to pay off my student loans. I'm not really going to be making tons of money as a primary care doctor, but I have like the average amount of student loans, so it's not like it's not that it's not doable at all. So I don't know. That's why I haven't really gone either way yet.
Yeah, you definitely have to weigh out all of these things. For me, it's a unique situation because I did 3 years of residency, a chief year, 3 years of fellowship. I'm doing a T32 year and then an interventional year. So I'll have 9 years completely covered.
Right.
It would not, and I have $500,000 in student loan debt, so it wouldn't make sense for me not to do PSLF. But for some people, yeah, you have to weigh out, like, is it even worth it dealing with the hassle of like what you're going through right now?
Yeah. And it's also, we were promised a certain amount to be forgiven with the last presidential election. So, just wondering if that's going to happen. Should I hold out? Should I refinance now? That sort of thing. So I was wondering if I could split it. That would be
My
nice.
personal opinion is you will not get anything forgiven outside of a forgiveness program. I think all administrations have moved on from just forgiving small amounts of money. Navient says they will. Right now, I just want to see it happen. The forgiveness programs are set in stone, but I don't think we're just going to see money disappear. Maybe. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't bank on that.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Of course. All right, everybody. Shobhan, you got to have something for me next month of what you did in the last month.
I'm gonna try, Kush.
I know. Now I know everyone's busy, and if you don't use this stuff now, it's like you'll use it later, and this information is timeless. All right. Cool. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you.